Good evening and welcome to the San Bruno City Council regular meeting of March 14th, called to order. And we want to thank the Garden Club for their arrangement. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Davis?
Here.
Councilmember Medina?
Here.
Councilmember Salazar?
Here.
Vice Mayor O'Connell?
Here.
Mayor Medina?
Here. Mr. Kevin Mayer, may I ask you to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening here at the City Council meeting? Everybody rise. Allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Kevin. Public comment for items that are not on the agenda.
John Barrelier.
John. Good evening.
Could you hold my time until I start? Okay. I noticed on the agenda you're honoring two people for working for 25 and 35 years respectively. I would like to personally congratulate them. Okay. Once upon a time, 75 years ago, when I was 10, the guys and I had our heroes. They were the Lone Ranger, Captain Midnight, Hopalong Cassidy, the Lone Ranger, Red Rider. Then there were those who had special abilities, a little more. Superman, who could make bullets bounce off his chest, leap tall buildings at a single bound. Batman and Robin, the daring duo, who could really hold their own with vile villains. Kapow! We weren't really interested in Wonder Woman and her magic lasso. Remember, we were only 10. I had to rethink Captain Marvel recently, because when Billy Boston says, Shazam now, a woman is likely to show up. Not that there's anything wrong with that. So what makes a real hero now in our adult world? Courage, as recently shown by a young man who saved dozens of his classmates recently. Action, immediate movement, no hesitation. The moment is read and understood. There is no, let me get back to you on that. Being a hero doesn't always involve danger. Sometimes it's just an opportunity to help because it's needed. And it's given sometimes anonymously. We all aspire to heroism, but we don't want to get hurt doing it. You don't have to. Kindness is heroism. Visit your first grade teacher and thank her for teaching you to read. Do the dishes without your mother asking you. Grace is my favorite form of heroism. Quiet reward is astounding. Doing something good simply because it should be done. Last meeting, I recommended that you hire an extraordinary person, full-time, deserved, because Kathy Schmidt has already done an amazing job here at the Senior Citizen Center for 30 years. Here it is, your chance to be a hero. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any other speaker cards? Is there anybody in the audience that wants to speak on an item that's not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to announcements and presentations. Step down to the podium. We have two presentations this evening, and it is with extreme honor and pride that I and the council and you folks are here to acknowledge your years of service to the city of San Bruno. Our first person we're going to honor is Mr. Michael Kennedy, who has served 25 years. Mr. Kennedy started his career as a firefighter with the city of San Bruno in April of 1994. Mike served as a driver, operator, and was one of the first firefighters trained to operate the department's aerial tiller truck. Mike's strong mechanical aptitude allowed him to serve as one of the department's shift mechanics for several years. He has participated in several apparatus purchase committees during the time in the department. Most recently, Mike was responsible for leading the committee and that recommended and purchased the new engine and aerial ladder truck. And I do remember when you had Mayor Ruane sign the final PO just to make sure it was all taken care of. Over the years, Mike has had several other responsibilities, including ordering and maintaining our portable radios, as well as our self-contained breathing apparatus. Mike served as a fire captain from November of 2011 until July of 2017, when he was promoted to battalion chief that he currently serves in. Since he's been promoted to BC, Mike has played a key role on the command staff. He oversees the recruitment process, which has resulted in hiring 8 new firefighters since he was promoted. He also oversees the department's apparatus and tools equipment. Mike continues to provide leadership and guidance to the member of that department. And I will say, on a personal note, knowing Mike, as most of those that work with him or serve the city know, he's a very quiet and shy, reserved man who doesn't have much to say, which is not true. Mike is opinionated, and he has, I'll say, the desire, the dedication, and the passion, not only for the department, but for the community that he serves. It is with my distinction and honor, along with the City Council and this community, to thank you and honor you for your 25 years of service to this community and its residents. You can introduce your family.
Yes. I just want to thank the community of San Bruno for this wonderful job that I've enjoyed for 25 years. It's been a pleasure. I want to thank my wife Cindy and my daughter Sarah, my parents Trish and Bill Kennedy for all their support throughout the years, and I want to thank all my fellow firefighters who have made it such a pleasure to work here and an honor. Thank you very much.
The next person we're recognizing this evening is Kevin Mayer, who has been here 35 years working for the city of San Bruno. He began his career with the city of San Bruno working with the Parks Division in April of 1984. His first assignment was on the Mow crew. This is the crew that is responsible for going all throughout the community, to the parks, to the facilities, and obviously knows firsthand truly the entire city. Kevin was assigned to this crew for several years before being moved over to the parks crew responsibility for the maintenance of parks and medians in all areas east of El Camino. With this new assignment came new responsibilities. Kevin quickly adapted to his new role and spent the next 12 years working with this group. He was then moved to the parks crew, which is responsible for all areas west of El Camino and is where he is still working today. For the last 18 years, Kevin, and I mean this, has graciously worked the weekends during the peak season, which is April through October. As you can imagine, not everybody may want to volunteer for that, and this is at regular pay. What Kevin enjoys most about working the weekends is it gives him the opportunity to interact with the park users who are all renting picnic sites, the user groups that he sees on the athletic fields. And you may have seen, if you'd rented the park in the last 18 years, you may run into Kevin, who's offered you more than one bag in order to keep your area clean, and San Bruno the same way. And again, notable that has always turned down many free meals, which I don't know that I could have done that. In his time away from work, Kevin enjoys bowling, spending time with his pets, and spending time at his family's cabin in Twainhart. Kevin has an easygoing attitude and is always willing to do whatever he needs to get the job done. He always has a smile on his face and has enjoyed coming to work for the past 35 years. We truly appreciate his work, his ethic, dedication, and loyalty. And I must say, from somebody who worked from Parks and Recreation, I worked with Kevin. And it is true that he has a strong dedication and commitment to the job that he's done. And I have run into very few people that are here each day and enjoy each one of them. And I, on behalf of the City Council, this community, and its residents, Kevin, want to thank you very much for your 35 years of dedicated service to this community. This is how I remember Kevin, because I'm not going to say anything.
Oh, it's not going to.
Go ahead. I'm mayor now, so I can be.
I remember Rico here working working at the rec, and he said he was going to be mayor one of these days, and I remember it. Now he's mayor. It's good. I like working, on the weekends, and helping the people and all that. But thanks.
No, and we thank you for the work, and at least it says I keep my word. And once again, congratulations to both, and we appreciate the dedication to this community. Also, we're going to move on to present some proclamations. The first proclamation is declaring May 12th through the 18th National Police Week in San Bruno and announcing Police Recognition Day at the mall upcoming on the 18th, which we will hear more about in just a brief moment. I'm not going to read all the whereases because I think it's better to hear from Sherry herself. But at the end, now therefore let it be resolved that I, Rico E. Medina, Mayor of the City of San Bruno, hereby proclaim the week of May 12th, 2019 through May 18th, 2019 as National Police Week, and I encourage all residents to join me in commemorating the law enforcement officers, past and present, who have rendered dedicated service to their community by preserving the rights and security of all its citizens. And I would ask Mrs. Davis if you would present this to Sherry at the podium. Please, whatever you'd like.
Is it on? Yeah. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. The San Bruno Police Department, partnered with the San Bruno Citizens Crime Prevention Committee, is once again holding our annual Police Recognitions Day at the Shops at Tanforan on Saturday, May 18th from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. This will be our 37th year of the event, which honors peace officers killed or disabled while serving their communities. This year, we have 23 different agencies coming out. They'll be set up throughout the mall with their cars and booths. Come on out to meet your local police officers, check out police vehicles, see canine demonstrations, or obtain crime prevention and recruiting information. The canine demonstrations will be at the center court between the escalators at 1 and 4 p.m. on the JCPenney side of the mall.
Thank you very much. We look forward to it, and it's been something that's held for years and years in this community, and we appreciate it. Thank you. Next, there will be a presentation of a proclamation declaring May 19th through the 25th, 2019 as Public Works Week in the City of San Bruno. Dennis will be receiving this on behalf of the department, and I will just read, now therefore I, Rico E. Medina, Mayor of the City of San Bruno, proclaim May 19th through the 25th as Public Works Week in San Bruno, and we call upon our citizens and civic organizations to acquaint themselves with the issues involved in providing our public works to the community and recognize the contributions that our public works officials and staff make every day to our health, safety, comfort, and quality of life. And I will say that I was at,
Touch a Truck.
Touch a Truck, and I will say that the kids loved it, and it was for all the public safety as well as the public works, and I think it's a great program that you put on, so thank you for that in advance. And if I could ask Councilmember Salazar to present this to Dennis. Thank you. Please.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Dennis Bosch. I'm the Deputy Director of Public Works for Maintenance and Operations. Thank you very much for this proclamation. on behalf of the entire Public Works Department team, a team that which I'm proud to be part of, we would like to thank you for the proclamation. The city has a group of dedicated public works staff who works very hard every day to provide the critical services and programs that our residents and community count on. There are lots of tasks that our staff does daily, such as testing water quality to ensure it meets the regulated standards, quickly responding and repairing water main breaks so our residents and businesses will have continued water service, keeping our drain inlets free from debris to prevent any flooding, repairing potholes to provide smoother surface for cars to drive, cleaning sewer pipelines to ensure it is continuously flowing and to prevent any potential sanitary sewer overflows. We've completed many projects this fiscal year and are in the process of improving the very much needed water and wastewater infrastructure so the city can continue to provide a safe and reliable service to the public. We'd also like to thank all the other departments in the city that support our department every day, and also the City Council for your continued support. This year, for Public Works Week, staff will be holding an event similar to the Touch a Truck event held a couple weeks ago at Bel Air School that the mayor just mentioned. The thought is for staff to bring the vehicles we use in our daily operations to several schools and teach the students about the vehicles and importance of public works operations. Staff has been in contact with the San Bruno Park School District, and we are confirming the event for several sites. We will also be holding another event similar to what we've done in the past during the summer at the parking lot adjacent to the city park pool, which has been very successful. Children from camps and residents are provided access to see our equipment with some live demonstrations and learn how the department works and how we use the machinery. We will let you know when those dates are scheduled. Thank you again. And if anybody had the chance last year when we went around to several schools, we actually kind of put on a little skit where we used the backhoe arm of the backhoe to act as kind of like a dinosaur. And it was really, and I know there's been pictures that have floated around. The kids really love touching the trucks and sitting in the part of the loader. So it's really cute. So thank you very much for this proclamation.
Thank you, Dennis. Also, finally, under announcements, I do want to announce the 6th Annual Community Day in the Park that will be held on June 2nd, immediately following the 79th Annual Posey Parade. What I don't want to forget is also prior to that at the San Bruno Fire Department Station 51, they will be having the annual pancake breakfast, so you can start your day at the fire station for the breakfast. The parade for the Posey Parade 79th begins at 11, and at 1 o'clock at City Park, where it concludes, will be our 6th Community Day in the park. With that, we'll move on to consent.
On the consent calendar, all items are considered routine or implement an earlier council action and may be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion unless requested.
Are there any items? I have one for a comment, but it doesn't need to be pulled, and that's F. Are there any ones that wish to be pulled for a separate vote or discussion? Seeing none. And we're going to take first items A through D. A through D as well as F. We're going to take E separate. But on the item F, what I wanted to point out is in our report, it was about authorizing a continued audit of our system. And when I say the system, and that means going into the taxes and the audits, and this is something that has not happened in this community for, I think, over 2 decades, potentially close to 3. And it was also negotiated at a better rate. So what they usually charge, what they come in is they audit, and they want to see if what is being reported tax-wise to the city for TOT, sales, all of those things are done. So basically, they receive monies, and the finance director can correct me, receive monies based on their findings. If they find that there are improprieties in it, and not in a negative way, just they're not being recorded, and so they get that. So that was at a 15%, which usually is at 25%. But again, this is something that through our team has brought forward that has not been done in almost 3 decades and is probably overdue. So I just wanted to acknowledge them for that. So with that, items A, B, C, D, and F, do I have action?
Through the chair, I'll move that we approve all of those items.
Second.
Motion made and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I have a 5-0 voice. On item E, we're going to do that separate because of one of the council members. So this is on item E. Is there any action?
Move to approve?
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's 4-0 with?
Right, so I have to recuse myself from this topic because I live within 500 feet of the property, so that's why I can't vote on it. Thank you.
Motion carries 4-1 with Councilmember Medina recused.
Yes, thank you very much. Now we'll move into our public hearing.
Through the chair, just to clarify that.
I'm sorry.
It was 4-0.
It's technically
Not
4-0-1 because there's 4 yeas, no nays, so 0 nays, and then 1 recusal.
One recusal. Got it.
Okay. You're welcome. Public hearing.
Item 6A, hold public hearing, waive first reading, and adopt ordinance enacting 4.43% rate increase for Recology San Bruno garbage and recycling service to be effective July 1st, 2019.
Finance Director.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Keith DeMartini. I'm the Finance Director for the city. And it is my pleasure this evening to present the annual rate adjustment for garbage services here in the City of San Bruno for fiscal year 1920. The objective of tonight's presentation is to receive an overview of Recology's rate application for next fiscal year. I'm also going to ask that you receive an update from Recology staff, they're here this evening, on various education and outreach efforts that they have going on. I'd like you to also receive an update from the city's consultant that we hired to review the annual rate application, R3 Consulting, on their review and recommendations. And then I'll be asking you to waive the first reading and adopt an ordinance enacting a 4.43% rate increase for Recology effective on July 1st of 2019. Okay, so just a brief agenda for the evening. We'll cover the rate adjustment. We'll talk about the rate changes for residential and commercial toters. We'll talk about the protest period and the public notice that went out to all residents and property owners. Talk about public outreach and education. We'll go over the consultant report. We'll talk about the remaining items on the timeline to implement the rate increase, and then a reminder of our request to council this evening and take any questions that you might have. Okay, so just an overview of the rate application that the city received from Recology back in February. The rate increase that is being requested after the city's consultant has conducted their thorough review is a rate increase of 4.43%. And these rates would take effect on July 1st of 2019 if approved by the City Council. The rate change factors at a high level are primarily due to the effects of the National Sword campaign by China regarding contaminated waste. This has an impact both on lost revenue for Recology and also additional processing costs on them as well. And then again, Recology and our consultant will go into a little bit more detail about the impacts of the rate increase. Here's a really high-level summary table on the residential garbage toter rate change summary. And you can see the dollar increase for the various sizes of toters that a majority of San Bruno residents currently have. So for example, the 20-gallon toter, the current rate is $23.34, and that toter rate will be increasing to $24.37 effective on July 1st. Up next is a picture of what the public notice looks like that was mailed out, again, to all residents and property owners on March 28th. There was a public hearing that was scheduled that we discussed a while back. The notice also talked about the protest period, the approval process, details about the annual rate adjustment, the proposed increases to garbage, recycling, and the organics types. And as of April 30th, the date that we prepared the staff report, there were 111 written responses received, and checking with staff today, that number has increased to a total of 128 written responses have been received since the date we opened up the period, for your knowledge. Okay, so with that, I'd like to ask Kirsten and Raina, staff from Recology San Bruno, to come up, and they'll give a brief overview of various education and public outreach efforts that they have currently going on.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Kirsten Pinocchi, the General Manager for Recology San Bruno, and with me tonight I also have Raina Osigera, who is our Waste Zero Specialist, and I've asked her to come tonight because I'm going to have her talk a lot about the outreach, as Raina is one that conducts a lot of the outreach into our commercial and residential communities. A year ago, when the national sword had really started to take off, Recology came to the council and asked your permission to really take a hard look at contamination in the residential sector. We were taking that proactive approach, knowing that the cost to process these recyclables was going to increase, and therefore the revenue was also going to decrease for the residents of San Bruno. So back in May, a year ago, we started delivering these residential cart hangers to the blue carts that were contaminated. We've had the driver circle the contaminant and leave this on the cart and warn the resident that their recycling blue cart was contaminated. And then we also follow up with a written letter to the resident, and then we also will follow up with a phone call. So our efforts in 1 year, these residential cart hangers have decreased by 60%. So, and contamination is extremely, has decreased quite a bit. So actually in the last 30 days, I would say, we haven't had a contaminated load go to our processor. So it's just kind of be mindful that Recology is very aware of the cost, and everything that we do does affect the ratepayers. So we are being extremely mindful of watching our contamination levels on the residential end. So now I'm going to pass the outreach portion to Raina.
Thank you. As Kirsten said, my name is Raina Osigera. I'm a Waste Zero Specialist for Recology San Bruno. And I've been working a lot on outreach this year that I've been in my position. So our first order is commercial signage. We provide commercial signage to all multifamily dwellings and businesses in San Bruno. New multifamily dwellings that open in San Bruno, we give buddy bags, we give a battery bucket, and we give our signage to place on all enclosures and containers, so residents and staff are aware of what should be going into each container. At multifamily residences and commercial partnerships, we go through 3 processes. Contaminated bin recovery. So I have taken the liberty to really hone in on recycling because of the national sword and because of the rate increase. We really want to make our residents aware of what is happening to all their recycling that is being contaminated in their bins. So we've made a lot of efforts of contaminated bin recovery, and they're directly aimed towards recycling and organics bins. At sites that have an issue with contamination of their organics and recycle bins, we work with their property managers to assess these bins and to implement a contaminated bin recovery process. So this process is a multi-step process, and first we have our drivers look at the bins that they're going to service. If it's contaminated, say a recycling bin is contaminated, they do flag it with a green non-collection notice. They note on the tag what is contaminating the bin, and then they leave the bin there, not serviced. Once they come back, they give me the tag. I reach out to the property manager. I tell them what was contaminating the bin. They have their staff go out into the bin, clean out the contamination, and we come back the following day, and they don't have to pay a fee. If the bin is overly contaminated, and they do not want to clean out the contaminants, we can go back and we charge them the contamination fee. We've seen a lot of success with this program that we've implemented specifically at the Google offices managed by CBRE, the Shelter Creek condos, and Jack's Restaurant. Oh, I'm sorry. Go back. We also have enclosure audits. So when we get reports from a driver or even the city that an enclosure is overly contaminated or overly filled, we reach out to that business, we do an audit, and we make sure that all bins are placed properly so residents and staff and our hauler, us, our driver, can access the bins. We also post signage there. And the most recent topic, our organics law. So the new AB 1826 law is in place. It's the mandatory organics recycling law. So this was implemented in January 2019, and we're rolling it out into San Francisco slowly. So this is an ongoing effort, and it's basically if a business generates more than 4 cubic yards of waste per week, they are required to sign up for an organic spin. The lowest amount is 32 gallons. So we've been slowly rolling this out to different businesses, and we've been seeing a lot of success with this. Once I present them with all of this information and they sign up for a organic spin, we provide staff training and we provide internal bins for them. And a lot of my efforts are going towards the schools. I have a soft spot in my heart for schools. So I've been working a lot with an effort. It's a zero waste schools program. So I've been working with the San Mateo Office of Sustainability and the San Mateo County Office of Education, along with the San Bruno Park School District, to implement a Waste Zero program partnership with these schools. So our pilot school right now is Portola School. All of the teachers and staff are very enthusiastic, and we're rolling that out right now. This is a 3-phase program. So the first phase being a needs assessment and planning, which is underway at Portola. The second phase being guided implementation, which includes purchasing of internal bins and implementing an organic spin at the school at schools that do not already have them, because it is the law by AB 1826. And the final and third phase being sustained success, making the kids accountable for what they put into the bins and teaching them why it's important to compost and recycle. And we are rolling this out, and we are seeing that in fall 2019, the start of the school year, that all schools in the San Bruno Park School District should be utilizing this program in their schools. Thank you.
Okay, so the last piece is we really want to be able to stay in the community and be educating everyone as often as we can. If there's educational booths that are available, we'll sign up and we'll bring staff there to give demonstrations or answer questions to the public. We recently have an educational video about recycling on the cable channel. If you're interested, if you're having an event, even here at the Senior Center, we encourage everyone to reach out to us. We'll partner with you to make to help your event be a zero waste event. We'll encourage you to use the paper products. We'll deliver a green bin. So if anyone's having an event at the Senior Center, they should definitely reach out to us. We also want to give back to our community as often as we can, and I know Garth is going to talk about some of our give-backs in his presentation, but we recently had the compost giveaway, encouraging the residents to continue to compost because their efforts are directly being given back to them via some nice dark rich compost. And Raina meets with the kitchen staffs of all of our restaurants, which is a really difficult piece of the compost part of our program, but when she gets everybody on board, and we can get all that diverted out of our waste stream. So that's good. That's our piece for now.
Okay, thank you very much, Kirsten and Raina. I really appreciate it. Now I'll ask Garth Schultz from R3 Consulting to come on. And he is the consultant, the principal at the consulting firm that the city hired to conduct a full comprehensive review of Recology's fiscal year 1920 rate application. So Garth, if you could.
Thank you, Keith, and good evening, Honorable Mayor, council members, staff, and Recology staff, members of the public. Again, I'm Garth Schultz with R3. I was your primary analyst on this review of Recology's rate application. Just a quick disclaimer about R3. We exclusively serve local agencies and local governments throughout the state of California. We don't work for Recology. We don't work for other garbage companies. We work for you to represent your interests and ratepayer interests on matters like these. You can go on to the next. Oh, you're there. Very good. So we supported city staff review of Recology's rate application. It's the first time that there has been a thorough examination of a rate application like this proposed by Recology, or at least the first in quite some time. So it was an illustrative process for city staff and Recology alike. It's important to understand for context that Recology is the exclusive provider You have a franchise agreement with Recology to provide the collection of garbage and organics and recycling here in the city from residents and businesses. And it includes a number of different services, not just curbside collection, but other types of services inclusive in one big package. They don't receive tax revenues. All of the revenues that they receive for compensation for these services is via the rates, maximum rates set by the City Council, collected by the city via the utility bills, and then remitted to Recology. Next slide. Under the agreement, Recology is able to request an annual adjustment to rates, and through the agreement, the city has an obligation to review that rate application and consider adoption of rates pursuant to that detailed review. That's the role that we've served in association with your finance director here. This year's rate application was, as you've already heard, somewhat steeply affected by the international market change around recyclables prompted by China's national sword policy. Kirsten already noted this, but really the main effects of that were a decrease in net revenues received by Recology, which were previously used to offset the rates paid by the ratepayers here in the city. So there's no more of those revenues. Those revenues can't be used to offset rates any longer because they don't exist. And on the other end of that, rather than a net revenue, we now have a small net cost to process those recyclables. So rather than receiving a net amount of revenue per ton, there is now a net payment per ton due by Recology to external third-party processors of recyclables. And what I mean by that is there's folks who separate all of those things back out after you put them in your blue bin, your mixed papers and cans and bottles. There are machines and people who separate them back out at a plant or a facility and make them ready for sale on the regional and international marketplace. Next slide. Actually just covered that. So within that main adjustment, 2/3 of the rate that's being recommended is due to that change in the recyclables marketplace, fully 65%. It's anybody's guess where this is going to go. This is not an outcome that is fully resolved on the international scale. The trade wars are not helping it. It does seem to have stabilized somewhat for now, but this is something that can change in the future, and you should anticipate that there may be future changes depending on additional changes in the marketplace in the coming few years. Next slide. Now, to summarize their rate application, you've heard already it was applied for at a 5.34% rate increase. Due to the changes in the marketplace, there's also increases in the cost that Recology bears for disposing of the contents of a garbage bin, the landfill material that goes directly into a hole in the ground and is not recovered for recyclables or organics. But there are other nominal changes in hourly wages for the union employee drivers and other costs that the company bears. Our review process is detailed in the franchise agreement between the city and Recology, and ultimately what it ends up doing is tying all of their projected expenses and projected revenues back to actual numbers in Recology's audited financial statements, in the city's actual recovery of revenues through the ratepayers, and we reviewed all of that and made a number of adjustments that reduced the overall recommended rate in the following categories around disposal and processing, capital depreciation, and the others listed there. Next slide, please. So that's the brief summary of where we got for this. Folks generally want to know, with a rate adjustment like this, where do we compare? How do we compare? What does it look like in other communities? You can see here San Bruno's July 1, 2019 rates with this 4.43% in comparison to other San Mateo County cities. You are slightly below the average of those current rates. Other rates are going up. And council members, if you recall, when I presented in the study session to you a number of weeks ago, there was some question about the lower rates on the right-hand side of that chart. I have confirmed that many of those have fewer government fees in those rates than are applied here in San Bruno, and that is a reason for the lower rates that you see there. Next slide. Also, for context, rates are changing throughout California and throughout the Bay Area, with a number of significant increases being seen elsewhere. This is not to minimize the 4.43% that you're considering tonight, but to put it into a context of what's going on in the solid waste marketplace. And these adjustments that we're seeing are due to a pressure cooker of circumstances that are occurring and are continuing to unfold throughout the state. There's increasing state regulations, and I'll show you a couple slides on that shortly. These are in addition to what Raina kind of covered with respect to organics, but it's an advancement of those, and it's something to be prepared for. The impacts of China's national sword are, of course, a driver of this, but there's also the fact that we, as residents and businesses on a statewide level, and that tends to be true everywhere throughout the state, we are generating more waste over time. We're recycling more of it, and we're composting more of it, but we are also generating more of it. You might have heard or read about in the newspaper the Amazon effect. We're getting more shipped to our homes. There's more packaging. There's changes in packaging, and more of that packaging is lighter, more voluminous, fewer tons, but it fills up trucks quickly. And there's lots of plastic. There's a lot more plastic today than there was 5 years ago and 10 years ago and 5 years before that. So there is a set of circumstances that are driving rates up on a statewide level. I share this with you so you kind of understand it for context, but also to understand that there may be future changes. And I'm not predicting anything here. Recology is running a tight operation. They've demonstrated some of the efficiencies that they're providing within the community, but just so that you're aware of other things that are happening in this marketplace. Next slide, please. Folks also want to know what's driving the rate increase that's being considered. Keith did share the magnitude per month for residential ratepayers. This breaks that down for your most common ratepayer, which is those subscribing to the 32-gallon garbage service. Remember that the rates are based on the garbage container size, but it's inclusive of all of the services received by a resident or a business, meaning the recyclables and the organics and other ancillary services. As shown here, the changes to the marketplace for recyclables is the primary driver, with around 87 cents per month for most common ratepayers being that increase. The other amounts are shown here in the various categories. They're relatively de minimis in comparison to the impacts of the national sword. Next slide. Over time, your rates have fluctuated generally between 1% and 5% per year, with an annual average below 3%. That's a good average. And it's a testament to the agreement and the terms and conditions you have in that agreement with Recology. That is somewhat lower than the average we see for other types of solid waste operations, which are very largely labor and capital driven and don't tend to increase below 3% overall. So it has been a favorable rate adjustment over time for you there. Next slide. Now this is kind of my final parting words, just to give you something to think about and mull over and look forward to, and this is included in our report to the council and to the city. There is pending state regulation. It actually has been passed and approved and signed into law back in 2016. The final rulemaking and regulations are currently under development and are anticipated to be finalized by the end of this year. That deadline continues to extend over time. It seems like every 6 months it grows by 6 months. But ultimately, and I'll actually go into the next slide as well, it involves increasing new programs and regulations on local agencies about the recovery of organic materials that are currently going to landfill. Much of what is in waste going to landfill, that's the garbage waste, is organic, meaning food scraps, sometimes edible food waste, other types of organic and decomposable material that really should be in your green bin. The state has regulated this in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. They are serious about the regulations. They will have penalties on agencies that fail to comply. I don't see San Bruno being at risk of that, given that you have programs on the ground for collection of these, but it is something to be aware of and prepare for and start to make some plans around as the requirements do take effect in the coming 3 years. And with that, I'm completed, and if you have questions for me at the end, I'm happy to take them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Garth. I appreciate that. So just to wrap up the presentation here, just a brief overview of the steps that got us to tonight's presentation. On the 12th, there was a presentation that directed staff to start the 45-day notice to property owners, which was completed. We issued the notices, mailed them on March 28th. On May 14th is tonight's public hearing, considering the written responses and then requesting the waiving of the first reading. We would come back to council, the next city council meeting on May 28th, where a hearing is already scheduled for the second reading, and then the rates would take effect on July 1st if council is to act to approve of the rate increase. So with that said, again, the request to council this evening is to waive the first reading and adopt the ordinance enacting a 4.43% rate increase for Recology San Bruno garbage and recycling services to take effect on July 1st of 2019. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. And this is a public hearing. My understanding is there are no speaker cards.
Correct.
And I just want to check with the audience, is there anybody here who wanted to speak on this topic? Because once we close the public hearing, you'll be precluded from speaking. Seeing none, hearing none, do I have action to close the public hearing?
Through the chair, I move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 5-0. Okay, with that, we'll bring it back to the city council for questions, comments, etc.
I'll go first.
Please. Laura.
So I had a question, Kirsten, in reference to reduction of 60%, which is great numbers, I think. And so kudos to Recology for really, and the program that you put into place to really educate our residents, because it's a very confusing process. In fact, I liked your picture in there on the presentation with the kids where they had the 3 garbage cans and like the 3D effect with all the different types of recycling and what's recyclable and what's garbage. I mean, where do you see this going? So if we get to a point where we really have reduced our dirty waste and we're really doing well recycling, and maybe the question is for both. I mean, with this sword, do we see this increasing in our cost to continue to not accept our recycling because of other means? You know, you anticipate being able to recycle your material, and you anticipate being able to recover some sort of revenues with that. And I don't know if you have information on that or if our consultant has information, but I mean, we know where we're at today, and I appreciate the presentation. I appreciate the work the consultants did, but what are some concerns going forward?
Mr. Schultz.
Thank you. And just to restate the question, your question is pertaining to the recyclable stream and the possibility of markets recovering, and maybe through actions here in the city, could you start to return a better rate on those materials?
You put it much more eloquently than I did.
Just want to make sure I understood correctly, too. You know, taking local action to improve the quality of the materials, to reduce the contamination, does provide Recology San Bruno or any other hauler a better opportunity to market those materials, get a better price, have a lower processing cost, and position themselves well for reversing back to a net revenue generating standpoint if markets recover. Now, of course, that's within the context still of your international marketplace, and that if that marketplace doesn't have the demand for those materials, the price that you can fetch is low. But yes, it does have an immediate impact on Recology's ability to market, get processors who will agree to pay, and do that at a lower cost. And over the long run, that will be a better outcome for the city than continuing, not that you have, but if you were to move towards having less contamination and less of this outreach and education effort, it would be harder for Recology to do that on your behalf.
Great. And just to clarify your presentation, really 2/3 of our increase is really toward this issue. And so we as a community can really help in reducing our rates by really clean recycling.
I would say mitigate future rate increases by keeping clean recycling. The cost for processing these is highly regulated by the state via a variety of different permits for any operator. We do see that those costs tend to increase over time, but by maintaining a clean stream, reducing contamination, you can certainly offset those increases in the future.
Great. And since you're there, I'll ask you another question.
Please.
How are we in preparing for the Senate bill? I mean, is our city recycling enough, and is it going to meet those standards?
I can't speak to that as it's not an evaluation that we've been engaged to do. I will say, based on the services that I'm aware of that you have on the ground, you have organics in place for residential customers, you have an organics program for commercial customers. Recology and the city are implementing current state law regarding the mandatory commercial organics requirement. So at its surface, I think you're going to be well prepared. There are some nuances that I think should be evaluated just to make sure that you are fully prepared for some of the city's obligations. But at a strictly programmatic level, you've got a good foundation underneath you.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Marty.
Yes, well,
Yeah, Mr. Schultz.
I won't go anywhere.
because you're the expert, right? I'm sorry about that.
So they say.
So I think what I hear from our public is, wow, why does Recology get another rate increase? Like, they just got one last year, and they had another one. They get one every year. So as an expert in dealing with garbage companies and how waste haulers and how contracts, I would think, work, how common is it that where a company that's doing that business has the right to recover operating expenses every year? How can you describe this, give an answer to our public?
Yes, absolutely. I would say, the term and condition of a company being able to propose an annual adjustment or increase to the rates is 100% common for franchise agreements with private solid waste haulers. And I would state that that's not a cost recovery. It really, you've got kind of every third year an application process like this one that actually ties their application back to financial statements and looks at actual revenues. So they have every third year they have an ability to kind of set it to cost of service, and in the intermediate years it's tied to a market index, CPI. And that is also fairly common. So it isn't every year that it's tied to the market, that it's tied to actual costs of operations. It's only every so often. And then those intermediate years, you're doing it completely on an external basis. So for private contracts, having an annual rate adjustment included in the agreement is essentially the standard of service. And I have not seen one for a private solid waste company that doesn't include that provision.
Thank you.
Any other questions from staff? Okay. Michael or Irene, anything?
No, nothing.
Okay.
I was just going to make a final comment. If staff goes back to slide 20, you can really see the breakdown, and it's very minimal fees when you look at every aspect of that, the increase.
That one.
Yeah.
So, you're talking pennies here, and you've got things you can't control. So it's. Thank you.
Thank you.
Irene?
Oh, I just want to compliment Recology. I know Raina stepped up when the beautification task force asked her to concentrate on the schools and training the young people up so that hopefully the future will be a little easier and we won't even have to have Operation Clean Sweep because there won't be any trash. And also I wanted to thank Recology for the lovely lunch that they provided for everyone at Operation Clean Sweep. And since we're on the topic of trash, Cable has told me that the film that they did for Operation Clean Sweep is on our Channel 1, so yay, so people will be able to see it.
For myself, just wanted to check with Recology, those that did have a protest, will they be reached out to as far as the option of the 20-gallon and or if there's reduced service costs due to economics? So at least from our end, from staff as well as Recology, that those options are available for them to see if there are opportunities for reduced costs? Is that done? You can do whatever you'd like. Yes, please.
Yes. The city has provided us with all of the protests, and anybody who is in a 32-gallon or larger will be reached out to by our customer service staff to offer the 20-gallon. And I can tell you, the 114, a good 80 of them or so are still in the 32-gallon. So there's definitely an opportunity for those individuals to have a cost savings coming up. And if I could just touch base on Councilmember Davis's comment about how are we positioned. We are positioned very, very proactive. That is Raina's. That's why we have a Waste Zero specialist at Recology. That's her prime focus is to make sure that we are compliant with all the regulations. So she is constantly looking at the customers that come in for business, and the customer service staff will constantly advise her if a customer wants to stop service or reduce their service. So she's continually making sure that we're all in compliance. So we are favorably positioned.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from council? Is there any action? There is a waiving of the first reading.
Mayor Medina.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want
Please.
to clarify there was a typo in the title. It says hold public hearing, waive first reading, and adopt ordinance, and that should say introduce ordinance. This is not an adoption of this ordinance at this time.
Thank you. So back to do I have a motion or a second to waive the first reading?
I move we waive the first reading.
Second?
Motion made and second to waive the first reading. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. I hear 5-0 to approve. Then we're into the introduction of the ordinance.
I move that we introduce the ordinance for approval.
Second?
Motion made and seconded. City Clerk.
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar?
Aye.
Vice Mayor O'Connell?
Aye.
Mayor Medina?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item under public hearing.
Item 6B, hold public hearing and take the following actions to approve the 9-unit multifamily residential project at 500 Sylvan Avenue, waive first reading and introduce an ordinance amending Chapter 12.96 of the San Bruno Municipal Code to establish a planned development district, update the zoning map, and adopt a development plan for the multifamily residential development located at 500 Sylvan Avenue, and adopt a resolution approving a planned development permit, architectural review permit, conditional use permit, and authorize the city manager to execute a development impact fee agreement for the multifamily residential development located at 500 Sylvan Avenue.
Thank you very much. Vice Mayor O'Connell.
I need to leave the dais. I have property that's within 500 feet of the subject.
Thank you. So Vice Mayor O'Connell will be recused on this item. And we'll certainly let you know because you don't want to miss Keith's presentation after. Just wait a minute, please. Okay. Who's taking lead? Matt?
All right. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. My name is Matt Neubaumer. I'm an Associate Planner with the Community Development Department here at the City of San Bruno. Tonight I will be providing you with a presentation on the proposed development located at 500 Sylvan Avenue. Additionally, the project architect, Mr. Kuhn, is in attendance and will be presenting and providing additional details regarding the architectural elements of the proposal. I'd like to also point out that the property owner, Mr. Gandhi, is in attendance as well. Just want to provide an overall agenda for tonight's presentation. The presentation will first start with the objective for tonight's meeting. Next, I will describe the existing conditions of the subject property. Then I will present the project details, provide a chronology of major milestones for the project, and will provide additional staff analysis regarding a number of different subject matters. The presentation will conclude with a restatement of the requested project actions. The objective for this item is to receive specific project-level information related to the proposed 9-unit multifamily development located at 500 Sylvan Avenue, and to approve the project by adopting a CEQA conformity determination, waive the first reading and introduce an ordinance amending Chapter 12.96 of the San Bruno Municipal Code, and to adopt a resolution approving a planned development permit, an architectural review permit, a conditional use permit, and authorize the city manager to execute a development impact fee agreement. The site itself is located on the northwest corner of Sylvan Avenue and Green Avenue, and is approximately 7,300 square feet in total area. The site is located 1 block west of San Mateo Avenue. Surrounding uses to the west, north, and east of the subject site are 2-story multifamily apartment buildings. As you travel further in the northerly direction, the neighborhood transitions to a lower density residential district consisting of 1- and 2-story single-family dwellings. There are a wide variety of uses located to the south of the subject property. There's a city-owned parking lot, a single-family dwelling, an office, and the Ramada Inn is also located to the south. The site is currently developed with a vacant dental office. The site has a general plan land use designation of transit-oriented development. The property is also located within the Transit Corridors Plan area, and within the Transit Corridors Plan area, there are 5 character areas. This site is located within the Central Business District, or CBD, character area. The zoning for the site is R2, low-density residential. The applicant is proposing to demolish the existing vacant structure and construct in its place a 3-story multifamily building consisting of 9 residential units and a total of 14 parking spaces. The 9-unit residential building would consist of 6 two-bedroom units, 2 one-bedroom units, and 1 studio unit, which is located on the ground floor level. A number of different planning approvals are required as presented in the graphic. The proposed project is different than what is currently allowed under the existing R2 zoning designation. Therefore, the underlying zoning district, the R2 zoning, would have to be amended, and we would be changing the R2 zoning to a PD to allow for the proposed project. A plan development permit is always required when establishing a PD zone. An architectural review permit is required for the new building, and lastly, a conditional use permit is required to establish a ground floor residential unit. This type of application requires review from the Architectural Review Committee and Planning Commission and final approval from the City Council. City Council approval is required because of the proposed zoning district amendment, which is considered a legislative act. All legislative acts must be approved by the City Council. This graphic represents the overall project chronology. As part of the Transit Corridor Plan pre-submittal process, the applicant held a neighborhood meeting in May of 2017. 13 members of the public were present. The applicant submitted a formal application in February 2018. As part of the formal application review process, the project was reviewed by the Planning Commission on March 19th, 2019. At that meeting, the Planning Commission adopted a resolution recommending that the City Council adopt an ordinance for the associated zoning district amendment. The Planning Commission also adopted a resolution recommending that the City Council approve the plan development permit, the architectural review permit, and the conditional use permit. In terms of the overall site layout, the project meets all setback requirements and development standards that are found within the Transit Corridors Plan area. Additionally, the Transit Corridor Plan Design Guideline A1-1 requires buildings to be oriented with entrances facing a major street. As proposed, the main entrance, which includes the lobby, as represented by the red arrow on the graphic, is located on the south side of the building facing Sylvan Avenue, which would be considered the major street in this specific instance. In terms of massing and scale, staff finds that the building is respecting the overall scale and development pattern of the surrounding residential neighborhood. Both Sylvan Avenue and Green Avenue provide a good amount of architectural interest. Specifically, the second floor walkway overhangs the Sylvan Avenue garage entrance by approximately 4 feet. There's also 2 projecting elements that provide additional architectural interest along the Green Avenue elevation. And as previously noted, surrounding uses to the west, north, and east of the of the subject site are 2-story multifamily buildings. Along the west side elevation, 3 individual landscape lattices with vines help break up the blank facade, and along the north elevation, 2 balconies are provided, which help provide additional architectural interest. In terms of overall landscaping, the applicant is proposing a variety of drought-tolerant trees, shrubs, ground covers, and vines throughout the property. I'd also like to point out that there are 2 existing heritage trees located on site. Those are 2 Hollywood junipers as represented in the photos on the slide. These heritage trees would be removed as a result of the project. Therefore, the applicant would be required to obtain a heritage tree removal permit. I'd like to point out that the San Bruno Municipal Code requires that any heritage tree removed shall be replaced with either 2 24 box-sized trees or 1 36-inch box-sized tree. In this particular case, the applicant is electing to install 6 24-inch box trees, which exceeds the municipal code requirements. Regarding parking, the proposed draft Transit Corridor Plan parking requirements require 9 to 15. It's an overall range of parking spaces for the 9 dwelling units proposed of this unit mix type. However, the City Council provided direction to staff in January of 2019 to prepare a zoning code amendment to codify revised transit corridor plan parking requirements that are slightly higher than the existing standards. Based on this direction, the revised transit corridor plan multifamily parking regulations would require that studios and one-bedroom units contain one stall per unit. Units with 2 or more bedrooms would contain 2 stalls per unit, and then there would be 0.1 guest parking spaces required per unit. 16 parking spaces would be required for the proposed project based on these specific standards. However, it is not feasible to add an additional 2 stalls without losing an additional housing unit or reducing the number of proposed bedrooms. Staff takes into consideration that the project was submitted to the city and deemed complete prior to the City Council study session and direction. Staff is currently working on the associated zoning code amendments for the parking regulations, which we anticipate bringing to the City Council later this summer. In terms of the proposed project, as represented within the plans, there are a total of 13 parking spaces represented. In the interest of providing as much parking on site as possible, staff has included a condition of approval requiring an additional parking space be incorporated along the Sylvan Avenue frontage located directly to the east of the Sylvan Avenue curb cut. Therefore, a total of 14 parking spaces would be constructed on site, or would be provided on site. Staff finds that this is acceptable given the timing of the project relative to the new parking standards. In terms of fee requirements, the project is subject to the city's affordable housing program requirements. The proposed project includes 9 apartment units. A residential impact fee is required for all rental residential developments consisting of 5 or more units. The residential impact fee amounts to $25 per square foot. Based on the overall square footage of the proposed development, the residential impact fee would amount to $206,450. The developer will also make a payment of $98,271 to the city's unrestricted capital reserve fund based on the development impact fee agreement. All fees are due prior to building permit issuance. In conclusion, staff is supportive of the proposed project, and we find that it would greatly improve the appearance of the existing lot and provide much-needed housing in the community. Staff recommends that the City Council adopt a CEQA conformity determination for the proposed multifamily residential project. We recommend waiving the first reading and introducing an ordinance amending Chapter 12.96 of the San Bruno Municipal Code. And we recommend adoption of a resolution approving a plan development permit, architectural review permit, conditional use permit, and authorizing the city manager to execute a development impact fee agreement. This concludes my staff presentation. As previously noted, the project architect, Mr. Kuhn, is in attendance and will be presenting the architectural elements of the proposal. That being said, I'd be happy to answer any clarifying questions that you have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions at this moment for staff, or want to proceed? Thank you, Matt. So did we want to hear from the architect? Is that okay? Please. Thank you.
Excuse me while I switch glasses. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Alan William Kuhn, architect on this project. I understand I have 5 minutes to discuss the design of this new building in San Bruno. So I'd like you to know the first thing that I did when I undertook this project was to review the design guidelines that the city published. There are scores of design guideline requirements, and I've met several of them. But tonight I'd like to share with you the 10 most important design guidelines that are incorporated into this building design. First of all, I'd like to say that we did everything we could to meet the objectives of the transit corridor plan, and including providing protected storage spaces for bicycles. I think we have 5, and we have 2 additional bicycle spaces in addition to our parking spaces. So the first thing I'd like to talk about, and I have 10 of what I consider the most important design elements, and I'll get through them as quickly as I can, but I think they might be interesting to you. The first one that stands out in the design guidelines is one that's called visual anchors. And so you have to say, well, what's a visual anchor? Well, the great architect Frank Lloyd Wright referred to visual anchors as terminal masses. He used to say that if you take care of the terminal masses on a building, the rest of the building will take care of itself. And over the years, I've adopted that philosophy. So in this case, we have terminal masses at the corner being the elevator shaft, and on the left side of the building, on Sylvan, we have a stairway, which is also an access, and on the right side of the building, I have a terminal mass that goes from the Green Street, and it's actually a storage room that I built out to terminate that part. The other design guideline refers to unique roof lines having shallow and deep overhangs that create shadows and add depths to the facade. Well, this building has varied roof overhangs that creates shadows and lots of depth. The minimal roof overhang is 1 foot, but some of the roof overhangs are greater, as much as 6 feet. And so the combination of the balcony overhangs, the roof overhangs, and the various dimensions on the overhangs makes that particular design guideline work very well. Another requirement is number 3, articulated step backs. And so what does that mean? That means the building can't just be a box on a box. So in this case, I've stepped back the stairways, the balconies, and the second and third floors. And so this too adds to the visual interest of the building. Another design guideline is number 4, access to sun and air on all sides. And this building accomplishes that. And the building is designed not just as a facade, but all the way around that structure. Provides plenty of light and air for the future tenants. One of the most difficult things to do, and Recology was here tonight to talk about a little bit of what they require, but the trash enclosures are another important thing. And so they have to be accessible to Recology, but not visible for the public from the street right away. And this is accomplished by tucking the trash bins and so forth close enough for easy access by Recology, but hidden from view. Item number 6, it refers to articulated forms, architectural details, changes of materials, projections, and recesses. And again, there are lots of projections and recesses. And changes of materials, we incorporate some stone on the ground level at the garage entry, and also on the right side on Green Street, we've got a stone treatment just prior to that stairway on that side right there. And all of it, it combines with other architectural details at the stairway and the balconies to give that kind of a change of detail and material. So the other, on upper floor balconies, the private patios that provide outdoor spaces for the residents is another requirement of the guidelines. And in this case, we have a situation where the balconies are used to go from one side of the building to the other, from the elevator to the units, but each unit has a large private balcony enclosure. Some of them are toward the rear. The one-bedroom apartments, for instance, have balconies at the rear and the front. And so of all of them, they've got the nicest balcony set up. But the balconies themselves are much larger than you will find on most apartment buildings anywhere on the peninsula. And so my client and I discussed that, and we thought that was an important element to incorporate without doubt. Number 8 is the accent lighting, indirect downlighting, and so forth. And so this opportunity presents itself on the overhanging balconies where we have recessed lights that are indirect, casting light down from the upper levels, and also from ground lighting up which will accent the stone facade and portions of the landscaping. Number 9 is provide south-facing facade that maximizes heat gain and natural sunlight. This is something that's important for just the comfort of the property and the ability for this building to shall we say, collect heat and light. Number 10, drought-tolerant landscaping using drip irrigation and pervious materials all around. And we've accomplished that as well. And I think when this building is built, and I will say also lastly that my office is right across the street, and so I knew when I designed it I'd be looking at this forever. And so this has taken 3 years of my life to produce this design, and I think it's a good one for the city. Any questions?
Thank you very much, and I didn't have you timed. I know you've been working, and Mr. Gandhi, you've been working long and hard on this, so we definitely wanted to make sure we heard from you tonight. We have no speaker cards.
We do not.
Is there anybody in the audience that wanted to speak on this item? Once we close public hearing, anybody will be precluded from going to the podium. Seeing and hearing none, can I have a motion and second to close the public hearing?
I move we close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to close public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That's a 4-0 with one recusal. And now we'll bring it back to council for comments or questions.
Comments? It's a great addition to the neighborhood. It's a beautiful building and design, so I think that's great. Adding additional housing is great to the area. I guess my only concern is really parking, and I don't want to see parking overflow into the public parking lots, which is already difficult to find parking for the downtown San Mateo Avenue. So I know in one of our previous projects we required for the Mills Park, we've discussed having, if there's any type of permit program implemented, that we would not allow them to be part of that program.
Matt?
Yeah.
Or Javon? Who's taking it?
Take it. So yes, we have talked about that for some of our larger developments. It is not in this agreement for this development.
And the only parking on the street, there's one parking stall on the street in addition, so nothing on either Green or Sylvan, just the one?
Director?
Hi, Darcy Smith, Community and Economic Development Director. The on-street parking, because this is a corner, I think there's more than one stall. Yeah, there's 5 on the street. So that was one of the considerations that we took into account in applying the parking standards, that there's already more on-street parking on this location because it's on a corner than you would normally see.
So what was the additional parking? There was 13 plus 1 or something, what was it?
Correct, yeah. So the additional parking was an area of the site where staff and working in collaboration with the project architect found a location to add a stall. It will require relocation of the guest or short-term bicycle parking, but we found that to be a better use of that limited space, and so that will provide for an extra stall. And
Okay.
frankly, in the only way to meet the new recommended parking standards is to either lose a unit or to convert 2-bedroom units to 1-bedroom units, so therefore to reduce the bedroom count. And because staff had been working for so many years, as you heard on this project, and it was deemed complete August 2018, there was just some relief that we felt like we could grant to this project. But I want to emphasize this is the only one. And so the other projects, such as Mills Park Plaza, the bigger project, that weren't so close to getting before the public hearing, we are requiring them to meet the new recommended parking standards. So this was the only one that was caught in between that council study session in January and this public hearing. And there were not easy solutions other than losing a unit, dropping or bedrooms.
Right. I had another question, but as I was listening intently, so if it comes back, I'll ask it.
Thanks. Marty?
Thank you. Yeah, parking. Parking is bigger than I think a lot of people really think it is. Throughout our city, and especially in the east side of town, I experience it all the time. So I'm not comfortable with allowing a project of this size, and it's small, but with six two-bedrooms, 2 one-bedrooms, and a studio, and it seems like there's maybe one guest parking. Is that correct? There's one guest parking?
That's correct.
Right. That's not going to work. You're going to have guests over. So I know it's not our preference to negotiate from the dais. However, I think that it's important that we're consistent, that parking already is impacted in the neighborhoods, and asking for the agreement to be amended or to include the provision that we've done at 111 San Bruno Avenue to prohibit occupants in that building to participate in a parking permit program. The reason being is that we're allowing denser housing with more housing into a smaller space. So the whole point there is that cars aren't needed because it's close to a transit corridor. Well, then it's not needed, then let's put it in writing. 5 more cars in that neighborhood would be a lot. So that's what I would like to see, and I could support this project. I understand they've been waiting, but I think our residents have been waiting for a long time about some solution to the parking. One guest parking is you can't even have a party. You're going to have people, in the streets. And did we do a parking study to see how impacted currently the streets are? No? Okay.
Director?
So no, we didn't do a parking study just because the project was, I'll just say, so close to meeting the parking requirements. We weren't doing anything sort of very unusual, and we had clear standards that we could apply. But I want to emphasize around the guest parking is that the requirement that we got council feedback on is 0.1 stalls per unit, or 1 guest stall on site. And then some guests can park on the street, which we have the 5 street parking stalls adjacent to the project frontage.
Just to expand upon that, I think it's important to note, one, that the project does fall well within the range of the current standards, actually on the higher realm of the current standards. It does not meet the new standards that came about just earlier this year and that need to be formally promulgated. So what's on the books, the project meets. It does also meet the guest parking requirement. It is a very small 9-unit project, and so that is part of the consideration in all of the analysis that went into the project, in particular not including the residential parking program, because it is such a small project and they are meeting the current standards. One of the potential challenges with the prohibition of this building participating in the RPP, because it is such a small complex and it only has 1 guest parking stall, is that if they are prohibited from participating in an RPP program, the guests will have nowhere to park because they will not be able to get a guest pass through that program. And so the prohibition of participating in any future residential parking program really is most applicable to very large units that have several guest parking stalls. But when you're talking about a project of this scale, it's just really complicated to do that and to have that prohibition. That's not to say if council is adamant about including it, that we can't go back to the developer and try and accomplish that. But what I'm doing is articulating why that was not included, just due to the size and scale and some of the complexities of a 9-unit building that is already meeting the standards that we have on the books, and that frankly began in 2017. And so this was, both for the parking standards and the development impact fees, one of those pipeline projects that we talked about, that was really wedged in between the implementation of the DIF, and that had begun, and it was one of those projects in particular that we sat down and negotiated with, because they were truly a pipeline project where staff had been working with the applicant since 2017.
Anything else? No, finish that, Mark.
So I understand that, but our residents are already having a hard enough time, and this additional unit is going to create additional hardship on the community. So I still would like to see that, and I'll leave it at that for the time being, and we'll see what my colleagues have to say.
Laura, you remember the question?
I remember the question, so I want to jump in real quick. Thank you. Is the parking sold separately, or will this be required to be included? So I don't, want somebody to can't afford rent or can't afford to, because we all know how it is. It's pretty expensive.
So one of the conditions of approval that staff is recommending is that the applicant shall submit a parking management plan describing exactly how parking spaces will be assigned. A minimum of 1 parking space per unit shall be required, meaning required to be assigned to the unit as part of the lease, and these are rentals, so it's just done through the lease. And then any additional stalls in excess shall have priority assignment to the 2-bedroom units.
Okay.
But the way this typically works in practice is, again, since they're leases and not condos, and the parking stalls aren't like deeded with the unit that's purchased, it's done through the lease. And if someone were to rent a 2-bedroom apartment and say, well, I actually only need 1 on-site stall because I only have 1 car, then that extra stall could be assigned to a 1-bedroom unit if there was the demand there. So, but that said, we will require the parking management plan, and what that does is provide the details of how it will be assigned. Typically, the spaces, for example, are numbered, and there's actually parking passes that are given to the vehicles, either a hang tag or a sticker, and so it's all very managed very thoroughly. And then usually the guest parking is signed such that no residents can park there, for example, overnight. It's reserved for guests. That condition of approval is required prior to building permit issuance, and is something that staff reviews and sometimes requires revisions, and ultimately is part of the project approvals.
Perfect. And they'll at least have 1 stall that they'll have to be required.
That's correct, yes, but it's not unbundled. So if you were to go to rent a unit, you're not then told, oh, you need to pay an extra $100 or $200
Perfect.
on top of your rent. And what that does is, some people are willing to pay it and some people aren't, and then they take their chances street parking. And so it was really important when we got your feedback in January that you gave us feedback that you don't support the unbundling, because again, that can result in people not paying the additional charge, which I've seen as high as $200 per stall per month, which is a lot. And then those folks can park on the street.
Great. Thank you for making sure that was included.
Michael? Thank you. So I generally like the project. I think it is very well designed. The scale is definitely appropriate to that area. It's definitely an improvement over some of the other multi-family units that are in the area. So this will definitely be an improvement. I share the concern about the parking, about it being a little short, but I also understand that this council changed the rules, and we shouldn't be holding people responsible for any changes in those rules when those designs were already submitted and gone through the process. I think that would be very unfair of us to tell someone that they should design based on some parameters, and then we changed our minds. We understood that there was a requirement to do that, and I definitely support the direction we're going in, but being that this project is already in flight, I wouldn't be in favor of trying to change any of those design parameters. In talking about what we can do with residential parking permits, I was just wondering if we could draw a boundary for those permits to include only single-family homes that are basically to the north of this property, and exclude basically the bulk of Sylvan, which is mostly multifamily units. And I believe we've discussed before where we can draw those boundaries pretty much anywhere where we see appropriate.
Yeah. I think the answer to that is a little complicated, but we do have leadway in drawing the boundaries for the residential parking program. However, we are not able to go around certain buildings based on their characteristics, single family or multifamily. And so one of the things that we talked about when this initially came up is that when the residential parking program is available and we draw those boundaries, it's really meant to protect the residential areas, and so we can draw it such that those boundaries do not include the central business district, mainly San Mateo Ave and maybe some of the surrounding blocks. And so I do think we have some leeway in how we draw those boundaries, but it needs to be objective, and it can't go around certain buildings and not include others.
Okay. All right, thank you. And are there any, I believe that that side of the street on Sylvan is all basically a no parking zone, so is that changing, or?
I don't know of any restrictions. I think that the street, you can park on Sylvan and the side street.
Okay, so maybe it was just no parking? Well, I thought I saw some no parking signs there.
Like around the corner, it's probably red, right, for site visibility. And sometimes there's red tripping around the driveways. But staff's recollection at this point.
So I just wanted to verify that there are no changes to that as part of this development.
Okay, it looks like there's no parking 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., but that's a little odd. We can evaluate this in a little more detail.
Maybe.
Yeah, some sort of signage, but that seems odd.
Okay. All right, that was it. Thank you.
Yeah, please, Tony.
I just wanted to clarify, I'm not advocating a change of the internal parking requirement. I get that. It's just that I believe that our community's parking problem has been not taken care of, and this is just going to make it worse. So that's how I feel. I think it's tough enough. I know how it is. And one more building with, I don't know, 7 more cars. I mean, it's just going to make it that much worse. It all pushes out. So I would like to have staff ask the developer at that 111 San Bruno Avenue. We asked, and the developer owner stood up and said, okay, we're okay with that. So I'm asking for that, and I can support it with that.
Okay, any other comments or questions from staff? From council to staff or to applicants? Anything on the comment that you just heard, or anything else from us up here?
No, I mean, we can certainly ask the applicant whether they would agree to the prohibition of participating in any future residential parking program. Again, I'll restate the complications with doing that for a very small building. of 9 units. Totally understand the parking concerns and the current impact on the neighborhood. But our approach to this was respected of the fact that the project began under certain guidelines in 2017, and it was very much a pipeline project that was really wedged in between frankly, a wholesale changing on development impact fees and a changing on parking standards. And this is one of those projects that kind of was caught right in the middle. And so we did work with the rules and ensured that they were on the higher end and took a hard look at the design and was able to recommend an additional parking space to bring them to 14, just one shy of what the total range is, which is 9 to 15. But we can certainly make the request.
Please.
And for people that aren't aware of the area, there is a public parking lot across the street. So I don't think we're asking, at least I don't think I'm asking too much for our residents that live there, that a guest could go park across the street in the public parking lot. Currently it's free. Currently. And you don't need a permit to be there. So you could park there. I think it's 2-hour parking there, or 5-hour parking there, I believe, and up until 6 or 7 o'clock. So overnight parking, there's spaces over there. People have to be aware that when you're moving into San Bruno, there's some parking problems. And so leave that extra car, take public transit. That's kind of the whole concept of transit corridor plan. So I'll leave it with that.
Okay. Any other comments, questions, thoughts? So you've heard a council member that was just asking the question. So is that a question that can be asked, or go ahead, Juan.
Should council like to direct us to formally ask that question, we can continue the hearing and come back to the city council once we have completed that process.
Go ahead. Please.
Sure. So if you continue it to a date certain, such as the next meeting, then we can get this information back to you. If you continue it to date uncertain, then we have to repeat the public noticing. I don't know if we can accomplish that before the next meeting, just because there's a public notice. It's a 10-day. So a date certain allows staff to get this back before you May 28th. I think if that's the only item and we can work on that, I'm confident we can get it back for you with a revised staff report and revised conditions of approval. But if you continue to that date certain, then we don't need to go through the public notice process.
Okay. Well, what's the wish? I'm going to approve yours, so what's the wish from?
Through the
my
chair,
colleagues?
I would recommend that we move forward to make their request, but not make it a condition of approval. I agree we can ask, but I don't believe we should make that a condition of approval. Okay. I'm ready to move forward and approve the project.
Laura?
I'd like to get the answer.
Okay.
So then if you make the motion to continue it to the date certain to the May 28th meeting, we can do our best to work with the applicant, get right back to you.
Absolutely. I wanted a date certain. I don't want to have to redo
May
the
28th.
public hearing notice. I want as quickly as possible to deal with these two gentlemen. I think they have been patient with this city. They have been doing this since 2017, from impact fees to design changes and what have you. And I think, we need to be respectful of them as they are trying to be of our community. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and have this date certain for the next council meeting with not having to hold the public hearing. Is that, Mr. City Attorney?
I would recommend a motion to continue.
Is there a motion to continue?
A motion to continue.
Is there a
And that
second?
would be to a date certain
To date.
May 28th.
Date certain.
Motion to continue to a date certain of May 28th.
Is there a second? Second. There's a motion made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. 3-1.
Motion
one
carries
recusal.
3-1-1.
Date
Councilmember
certain.
Salazar opposed and Vice Mayor O'Connell recused.
Yes.
to a date certain of May 28th.
Thank you. Please.
Items.
No, I was just telling.
Oh, okay.
We'll be allowing the Vice Mayor to return.
I'll read the title when Vice
Thank
Mayor
you.
O'Connell returns.
Okay, can you, I'll read it. Conduct of business, receive third quarter financial update report as of March 31st, 2019, and adopt a resolution approving the third quarter budget amendment for FY 2018-19 operating and capital budget. Finance Director DeMartini.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Keith DeMartini, the Finance Director for the city, and it is my pleasure, can you hear me? It's my pleasure to present the third quarter financial projection for the city for the current fiscal year 2018-2019. So the objective of the presentation this evening is to, number one, receive the Q3 financial update report as of the end of March 31st, 2019. Which is no action, but I am requesting an action to adopt a resolution approving of 2 budget amendments in the current fiscal year. So the agenda for the evening is to first receive an overview of the current fiscal year's operating budget, and also receive the Q3 update, which will include a summary of revenues and expenditures through the end of March 31st for the general fund, the 4 enterprise funds, and the 4 internal service funds as well. I'll provide a quick overview of the 2 budget amendments being requested and then have my formal request to City Council. So an overview of the current fiscal year operating structure. We do formally prepare financial reports on a quarterly basis. I've already presented the Q1 and the Q2 update to Council. Tonight is the Q3 update. Reporting on actuals to date through the end of March 2019. The Q4 update will be done in conjunction with the city's comprehensive annual financial report, or the CAFR, which will be done with our auditing firm, and that is scheduled to come in January every year. Okay, these 2 pie charts, which you've seen before, high-level overview of the city's revenue and expenditures. These pie charts are just for the city's general fund. As you can see, the revenue pie chart on the left shows the majority of our sources in the general fund coming from property and sales taxes. On the expenditure pie chart on the right, you'll see a majority of the general fund revenues being used to support the public safety departments with police and fire. Just a reminder that these are only for the city's general fund. The city does have a substantial amount of revenue coming from enterprise functions such as water and wastewater operations, which we'll talk about shortly. So just as a high-level overview of the revenues in the general fund through the end of Q3 compared to the adopted budget and the end of Q3 as of last fiscal year. In summary, the revenues through Q3 are at approximately 66% of the total budget, which is exactly the same as of the end of Q3 last fiscal year. So we are on the same run rate at the same time we were last fiscal year. Property taxes, our largest revenue source in the general fund, is typically paid by property owners in two installments, in December and in April. And again, it's on track to come in at the same, it's projected to come in on budget by the end of this fiscal year. For sales tax revenues, it's a couple $100,000 more compared to the same period last year. I had reported previously that there were some delays from the state in processing a lot of the remittances for sales taxes due to a very large system implementation that they were working on. Those delays have pretty much gone away now, so we are on track to receive all of the remittances that we should receive this fiscal year. We send out quarterly bills for the regulatory card room tax, and we're projected to be on budget by the end of this fiscal year as well. For business taxes, our annual renewal notifications are sent out actually coming up next month, and they're due back to the city on July 1st. Typically, July revenue is higher for that reason. And you will see a large percent increase in the use of money and property line item. That's primarily attributable to higher than expected returns that the city has recently recognized on our investments. So the next table is a high-level general fund expenditures summary by the departments that are funded by the general fund. In summary, the expenditures through Q3 are at 74% of the total budget, which is a little bit higher than we were at the end of Q3 at last fiscal year. Our expenditures are at $35.6 million of the total budget, and my review of the department's expenditures to date leads me to believe that all of them are within an acceptable range at this point of the fiscal year. There are no red flags that are jumping out at me at this moment. I've been working very closely with departments on controlling and understanding their expenditures to date and what expenditures they expect to have by the end of the fiscal year as we've been having budget conversations for the upcoming fiscal year budget process. So I feel confident at this point that these run rates are acceptable at this time. This next slide shows a summary of the city's enterprise funds. The first two, water and wastewater, the revenues through the third quarter are as expected. They do include 9 months of service charges from the 5-year rate plan that was approved by the City Council back in May of 2017. The revenues show higher than expenditures. The revenues do include all the revenue sources that go into the enterprise fund, from utility bills that get sent out, as well as water capacity charges for the hookups for new properties that come online. The fund does also have the operating expenses for the operation, as well as the capital expenses for both the water and the wastewater funds. Those capital expenses are shown in these funds as well. Cable revenues are consistent to last year at this time as well. We have instituted some cost containment measures in the cable department as of late. I've been working very closely with the cable director on that to really make sure that they do come in on budget this year, so that we do not see ourselves having a fund deficit like we have had in prior years in the cable enterprise. And also, you'll see stormwater fees are collected through the property tax roll as well. Payments we get for stormwater in December and April, typically from property owners as well. There's no major change to note there. The city does have 4 internal service funds: central garage, building and facilities, self-insurance, and technology. These 4 operations support the city at large. They support all of the city departments, and so these departments allocate out their expenses at the end of the fiscal year to all of the city departments. And we charge out those services on a monthly basis to departments. The only notable thing I'll say here is on the self-insurance fund. The expenditures were about $430,000 less than the same period last year. This was really due to a timing issue of when the insurance premiums were prepaid in the second quarter. So there's no cause for alarm there. It's just a timing issue. So just my takeaways after presenting a couple slides with a bunch of numbers on them. In the general fund, revenues are coming in as expected. So that is a really good sign. The expenditure run rates, in my opinion, are within a normal, acceptable range through 9 months of actuals at this time. And I have not identified any major issues with any of the actuals that I've analyzed at this time. And same thing with the enterprise and the internal service funds. It's normal expected activity. And just for an abundance of caution, particularly with the cable enterprise, as I mentioned earlier, really wanting to institute some cost containment measures to make sure that they do come in on budget. So I've been working very closely with the cable director on that. And all of this work has been used also in the preparation for the upcoming fiscal year 1920 city manager's proposed budget as well. So all of this work will flow very nicely has already flown nicely into that whole process. There are two budget amendments before you this evening. First, in the general fund, is for the Pine Box Culvert Fencing Project in Public Works. If you recall, in the 1819 adopted budget, there was an enhancement request for this project for $35,000 for the repair and replacement of damaged fencing sections around the Pine Box Culvert between 1st and 7th Avenues. This project is further along now, and it does require an additional $35,000 for a total project budget of $70,000, including contingency. This funding is being requested from the general fund balance that's currently residing in the general fund, and we have money to pay for this. That's the first request. The second request is coming from the restricted revenue fund. This is calls for a zoning code update in the Community and Economic Development Department. In the Planning Department's current fiscal year adopted budget, there is a line item in there for $12,500 already from this fund for normal general plan maintenance activities. An additional $60,000 is being requested to allow for a much more robust update to the zoning code, which is a strategic initiative in that department, and it will ensure legal consistency with the city's general plan and transit corridor plan and housing and planning related state laws. And the staff report goes into a little bit more detail about why we would like to move forward with that now. So just a little preview and reminder about the upcoming budget calendar for next fiscal year's proposed budget. Staff have been working very hard on reviewing and proposing next fiscal year's budget to City Council. We are on track to have the city's proposed operating and capital budgets to City Council by next Friday. The first City Council budget retreat is scheduled for Tuesday, May 29th. We are on track to have that. The second session is scheduled on June 11th, and the schedule is to ask for City Council's adoption of the proposed budget on June 25th. So with that, my request to Council is to receive the Q3 financial update report as of March 31st, 2019, and request that you adopt a resolution approving of the third quarter budget amendment for fiscal year 2018-19 operating and capital budget. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you very much.
Questions of Director? Michael?
Chair, thank you.
Please.
So, Mr. DiMartini, so it looks like we're tracking exactly like we were, pretty close to last year, but we ended up a little short at the end of last year. So have you had a chance to sort of dig into what sort of went wrong in that last little bit that sort of derailed us, and are we prepared to avoid any similar pitfalls this year?
I guess I might have to ask you a follow-up question, Councilmember Salazar, about what specifically you're talking about, how we came up short last year.
Well, at the end, we ended up, I believe, having to draw from the previous year's surplus to sort of make up the shortfall.
Sure.
So that we ended up a little short on the budget.
Okay.
And so if we're tracking similarly to last year, I'm just wondering, what. I mean, it looks good. It looked good last year, and then at the end, it's like, oh wow, we're a little short. So, how do we avoid getting into that situation? And I know that this is your first. You weren't here for that, but I'm just wondering if you had an opportunity to kind of analyze that, and if you have any insight into what went wrong.
Sure. So the first part of that is, I believe that this current fiscal year budget does have a budgeted deficit, meaning that we are budgeting to use fund balance in the general fund as the budget was adopted. And so that means that the revenue that was budgeted is actually a little bit less than the expenditures that were budgeted. And so this report is making sure, and the review that I'm doing is making sure that we do not exceed the expenditures above and beyond the expenditure budget, right? So I'm making sure that we don't spend more on the expenditure side than was originally budgeted, knowing that there was a deficit that was already budgeted, if you will. The review that I was talking about in a little bit of detail with the cable department, it was to that effect. Mm-hmm. The cable department specifically was budgeted at a slight deficit. So I'm working with the cable director to really make sure that they don't spend more than their budgeted expenditures.
And then going into the next fiscal year, you believe we'll be able to get to the point then where we are balancing without the need of using those?
City Manager.
Hi, so I'll take that one because that will be part of the City Manager's recommended budget. And so we are at the final steps in preparing a recommended budget for you that the City Council will receive on May 24th. And so what you will see when you receive that is that we have done a lot of work, department by department, division by division, to control costs, cut costs, not approve necessary expenditures, delay things, to try and live within our means as much as we can. I think what you will also see during that presentation on the 29th is that there are some needed expenditures that staff will be recommending that all in all might be one time, but I hope you'll agree that need to occur. We have some significant infrastructure challenges that we need to meet, and we will be recommending some capital projects that in total will be one-time allocations, but we may have a little bit of the same picture where we will be recommending a budgeted adoption that is slightly above our adopted revenue. We have and will continue to work hard to control that. I think through our larger presentations, this city has a fiscal challenge, and we also have a duty to live within our means and work on that. And so we are making progress to that. I can't tell you that, we will be successful in eliminating a $1.7 million deficit in 1 year. I don't think we're there, but we are working very hard at it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? Sure. Marty.
Thank you. There's some saying you want to get the bad news first, right? Something like that. It might have been Warren Buffett. But I think it's important to point out in the staff report really what you really are doing for cable. There are 7 different things here. Do you mind, for the public, just kind of going through a few of those and why, how important it is? I mean, I'm glad that we're doing this. In the past, we didn't. And our fiber installations are in, and so we're waiting for the rollout to figure out how we're going to pay for that rollout, which is a separate topic. But still, these 7 things I think are require, in my opinion, a little bit more sharing with the public so that they can hear it. So,
Director.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So on page 4 of the staff report, I list 7 things that I'm doing in collaboration with the cable department to control and contain the expenses in the department. We are delaying the replacement of vans and vehicles until next fiscal year. We are delaying or not moving forward with any non-essential equipment purchases. We are reducing some contractor hours and reducing the hourly rates of those contractual arrangements. We are reducing the internet service fees by a little over $18,000 per month due to the successful renegotiation of contracts with some of those providers. We are reducing some maintenance expenses to cover only ongoing contractual arrangements. We are reducing spending in professional development, special projects, license fees, dues and memberships, publications, subscriptions. We're reducing expenses in community promotions, training, rental leases, tools and equipment. We're basically looking at any and all ways that we can course correct and live within the means of the budget of that department within the last 2 months of the fiscal year.
Great, thank you. And that's difficult to do when we're trying to build the business where we have these new rates that are lower and more competitive for people that are watching now. They know because they're on cable. But I just wanted to commend staff on that, and I wanted to comment that we have some very difficult choices to make in the future, and the city manager touched on it. I look forward to discussing those challenges, and I'm looking forward to that to hear that report. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments, Laura?
Just a couple other comments. So, you always look back at the budgets, and I just like to remind people, 62% of our budget really is police and fire. It's an important aspect of our overall budget. And without, dedicated and fire department and police department where you can count on, that's an important thing. You just can't really cut costs, right? But the other important thing is really sales tax, and I'm really happy to see the analysis that we're going to be looking at that. And I think that's a big piece too, because it's kind of one of the things that I've always found very interesting is that we're spending more. I know where I'm spending a lot more. I don't ever walk into Costco without a large dollar amount. It never used to be that way. But I know I'm spending more in San Bruno, and I really try to advocate for spending in San Bruno, but we're just not seeing the revenue. And so it would be really, I'm very interested in seeing what the outcome of that is. And then the other question, and really a question just in that area, is online sales. And is the city able to pick up online sales, or is that going to the county?
Manager?
So most online sales are treated such that they go to the county pool and not directly to the cities. There's been a lot of talk and a lot of analysts following Amazon and how they treat their sales tax. Amazon has continued to pay their sales tax to the county pool, which has been beneficial because they, as of current laws last year, I can't say that I've kept track in the last 6 months, they were able to do special sales tax agreements where they have their warehouses and have that be the point of sale. But they have chosen not to do that, and they've chosen to allow that money to flow to the local jurisdictions. And so while if you buy an Amazon package in San Bruno does not immediately get that, all of those sales go to the county pool, and then they are distributed out to the cities, I believe, based on population. And so we do get a share.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Good presentation.
And then thank you for the report. Of course, I'm sure we're all looking forward to the 29th for 10 to 5. But I also wanted to thank Marty for bringing up the 7 items, because it's sometimes too, not everybody's going through every minutia of that. And it's also renegotiating, thank you, Sandeep, for some of the contracts where there was deficit and you've gotten that down. And it's actually just the hard work of going back, renegotiating, and doing things that have not been done to help bring that in line. So these are steps that truly are being taken that are unprecedented, but in order to make it work and come in with budget, I appreciate those steps. Okay, so with that, this is, we would need to adopt a resolution approving the third quarter budget amendment.
Motion to adopt the resolution for approving the third quarter budget.
Second.
Motion made and seconded.
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar?
Aye.
Vice Mayor O'Connell?
Aye.
Mayor Medina?
Aye. Now we'll move on to comments from council members. Michael? Marty?
Sure, I'm sorry. I just wanted to, I don't want to make sure I get the name right, but I'm a big baseball fan, and recently one of our athletes from Cappuccino threw a no-hitter. Mm-hmm. Mr. Gabe Meyer, I believe it was, and that's a big accomplishment. Wow. So no-nos are sometimes good, you know, and that's congratulations. Even better, even better. So, go Cap.
That was good. Just want to make a comment. Great job to Councilmember O'Connell for Operation Clean Sweep. It's a fabulous day and program, and it's really a feel good to see the families out there with their kids. And at the end of the day, the city looks even beautiful than it did. So great job and kudos.
Thank you. And I just was. Go ahead, Irene.
Well, I was going to thank all of you for participating. I really appreciate it. It's not always fun registering people because I'm getting anxious to go out, but thank you very much.
And I was just going to mention, in the last couple weeks, and of course, as Vice Mayor would say, and thanks to staff too for all their effort, we've had a lot happening in San Bruno in a good way. And I can just tell you, you know, looking at one weekend in particular that I attended these things between the 26th and 27th of April, Touch a Truck, which I alluded to, which of course a preschooler asked why I had gray hair. I wasn't quite sure how to answer him, but we did the best they could. The Day of the Child, which was a beautiful day and a success, and thank you for all the council for attending. The library book sale that I stopped by, the BASO Lions activity in the gym that they hold annually. It was their 4th annual. The Senior Center Variety Show, the American Legion Breakfast. That was just one weekend of events I had attended. But really what it is also, it's about the staff. And also I forgot to mention the firefighter for the day for 35th graders that were at the fire station. And if you can't imagine the look in their eye and the enjoyment that they had doing those activities. But that was just one weekend of items I attended. And it was just, again, a lot of staff being involved, the community being involved and helping out in various ways from Parks, Rec, Public Works, Fire, Police, all the departments. But also this last Saturday, I started seeing some people walking around town, and I could tell something was different. I went to the library, and there it was. It's a group that goes from communities and cities and towns, and they basically, there's about 30 or 35 of them that travel around, and they pre-plan this. They come, they get a sheet to walk either 5K or 10K in the community, and then they go and see various sites within that community. And they've done it at Colma. Saturday was here, and so I got educated on their program and the list, and that's thanks to the library for setting them up as well, so they could use that as a focal point of starting and coming back together. So what it references to me is that a lot does happen in the town that not everybody may know or see, but it also is the staff that is putting in those extra efforts as we also deal with the other items that exist. So thank you to council for participating in those things. Thank you to staff for your work and effort. If there be nothing else, then we'll go ahead and move to adjournment. The next regular city council meeting will be held on May 28th, 2019 at 7 p.m. here at the Senior Center. Please enjoy the rest of your week.